All right, Shirag. So thanks for joining me on this, what I told you is a delirious Friday. I got up this morning. We still had the car to unpack when we got back from Maryland because it was like 2:30 in the morning. My poor other daughter's sleeping in the house with the dogs. So we just left everything in the car and I didn't want to leave my wife with it. So I got up in the morning, unloaded the car, soaking wet because it's hot out here. And, showered, ran to the office and I had a 10 o'clock meeting. So it's been one of those days. I have a few more after you. But I did point out to you that we both went to Cornell. I went like much earlier than you did. But people say I look a little younger, so maybe I could lie, say I graduated 2000 instead of 1989.
You could have
Uh,
fooled me. Go Big Red. And
yeah,
for all, everyone out there wondering, what happens after you graduate from Cornell decades after? Well,
there you
you
go.
buy headphones and a microphone and you talk to each other. That's the
Right.
future for you.
That's Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate that. But you know that I'm passionate about college and the process, and I think that
Hmm.
it's a ridiculous. I mean, we're just all, drinking the Kool-Aid. You got to send your kid to school, you impoverish yourself, or you take on a lot of debt. And not only that, because that's not really what we're talking about today. There is a system to give you an advantage or not an advantage. If you just kind of throw caution to the wind, it's not so good. But maybe we can go back because this is a business podcast, right? We want to talk about the business that you've built
Sure.
and what you're doing. So maybe you can tell us about your background before Cornell and how you got into what you're doing. I think you got a PhD too, right? Out in
I
California.
do. I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I
So
have a
why don't you give
PhD.
us that whole story and
Sure.
we'll get caught up.
Happy to talk about it. And it's all interrelated to the work that I do specifically. So, to go way, way back and to talk about the impetus for this whole thing. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I'm ethnically Armenian, but my parents are both immigrants from Lebanon. So they met
Okay.
there, got married there, moved here during the war. Why does this matter? Because they settled in the States. And, when they had my brother and me, they were always talking about
Yeah.
education. In fact, it was my parents' ticket out of Lebanon. Essentially, my dad
Okay.
came here to get his master's. Settled in St. Louis for 2 years, and then they moved to LA. And so it was always like, go to great schools, get a job with benefits.
Yeah.
Essentially, to them, the education and the opportunity meant stability. The stability
Right.
they
Of
didn't have.
course. And that's true with all ethnic families. I mean, I grew up in a Jewish family from Eastern Europe. It's the same thing. I had friends from
Yep,
India. You're a loser if you don't become a doctor, a lawyer, or some other professional.
that's right. Yeah, be a
So,
doctor, dentist, lawyer, engineer, all that good
right.
stuff, and
Exactly.
very similar.
Engineer.
But except the issue with it is, when you haven't had your schooling, in the States, and you're not affluent and all that kind of stuff, it's always like, hey, yeah, son, do this. Okay, dad, how do I do it? What? Like, good,
Right.
figure it out. We figured it out. You'll be fine. It was that kind of thing.
Exactly. Just it can't be that hard.
Yeah. So I went to a small Armenian school in Los Angeles. So my parents wanted us to grow up in an Armenian enclave, and
Yeah.
I didn't have non-Armenian friends basically until college,
No.
other than kids in the neighborhood. And
Okay.
so I went to this kind of school, but now all my teachers were essentially immigrants. My college counselor was an immigrant to this country, so it's not like I had any sort of roadmap or plan that was handed to me. So
And
it
you
was,
learn you speak Arabic? Is that
I
what
speak
Armenian?
Armenian. So
Armenian is a
yeah,
separate language.
yes. So
Okay.
in Lebanon they speak Arabic and French and English, but we're Armenian. So my parents speak Armenian, Arabic, English, and French. I speak Armenian and English
So you
because
learn.
that's
Okay.
our
Got it.
that's our mother tongue. And
Got it.
so they wanted us to grow up around that, to have that community, to have
Yeah.
that
To
language and culture.
continue your roots. Everybody wants to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a
Yeah.
3-year-old now, and I speak with him and all that stuff.
Oh,
But
nice.
so when it was time for college, it was like, okay, time for college. Okay, counselor, how do I do it? And they're like, well, like, if you want to go to UCLA and, USC, these are the applications. Like, you fill them out, you send them in the mail. Good luck.
Now, this was just a guidance counselor at your school, right? This wasn't
Correct.
like a guy who had yeah, right. So, well,
No,
that's
no,
what
no,
they
no,
all
no.
say.
No.
No?
And the thing is, like, people, the work I do now, there was no way my family could access. First of all, we didn't know
Right.
this, this kind of support existed, let alone
Right.
having
Of
the money to
course.
pay for it. And so I was self-taught through the process. So I was always like, it was almost like what's behind the magic curtain, right? Like, I feel
Right.
like there's another world out there, the East Coast, these fancy schools. And so I basically learned everything that I could on my own through books, and the internet didn't have anywhere near what it has today. And I was able
Right,
to,
right, right.
get into Cornell. And, my high school's been around 50, 60 years. I'm the only person from its history to attend an Ivy League school, for context. So I
Just
had,
because you think that they didn't really think that that was even an option,
it's
or
not an option,
because it's not
Armenian
just the
families.
school, the guidance counselor system, even in the public schools, that's what you do. You go, they give you a brochure and they put you on. Now they have Naviance and
Right.
all these systems, but it doesn't, you're on your own basically.
Yeah. So there's the lack of knowledge piece. There's also the culture piece, right? Like, um, your parents say, why would you leave? We're here,
Right,
that kind of thing. And so you're
right.
expected to, go to school there,
Especially the
get
California
married to
school
someone from
system
your
is
community.
right.
It's great. Right. Right. It's
And
terrific.
it's a lot of people out of state want to go. They can't get in, that type of stuff. But yeah, but we both know Cornell's better. So
Yeah, there you go.
that worked out.
And so, went there and was also able to secure a bunch of financial aid and scholarships. And so I was able to, get out with no debt from tuition or anything like that.
Nice.
And it was interesting because along the way, I started meeting people who were almost like a secret they've been carrying. Like, oh my gosh, like you were able to get in. I've also kind of thought about that before. I've also thought about, is there something different? And
Right.
so people were like coming out of the woodwork and asking for help. And I was happy to do it, because I was like, oh, cool. Other people want to do this. Here's how you do it. Now, other friends and cousins and family members are getting into great schools, getting
Right.
into medical school, etc. And then they started telling people. Now it's the cousin's cousin, etc.
Yeah.
And over time, it just kind of grew organically out of my own necessity. And
So this
eventually,
really started. This started like right out of high school. You were
yeah, yeah.
looking to get into college and give yourself the best advantage. So
Mm-hmm.
what were the things that you discovered? Like, did you just start looking for books and you found somebody that wrote about this and knew it?
I can't even tell you like specific books that I read. I just
You don't even
remember
remember, right? It was a while back.
it was a while back. I mean, looking through these like school websites and reading their essays, and then buying a book maybe on college essays and being like, oh my gosh, like the way I'm writing about, and the way every kid in my school is writing. Oh, I'm Armenian. My parents came in from another country. We experienced the Armenian genocide, and this is what I want to do. The end. I was like, okay, these essays are sounding completely different. They're about personal things that you couldn't, that only you would know. Right. And
Right.
like your parents might not even be able to tell the school this thing about you. So, going deeper and deeper and getting more and more personal and sharing it with strangers, right? You're putting, at that time, we used to mail applications. So it's like,
Right.
I'm putting something in the mail.
People know what paper is, who's listening?
Paper. And also like,
Yeah.
what? There's someone in central New York who reads this paper, and I just
Right.
tell them everything about me. So it was a very strange experience. And
So you discovered that the more personal the essay, the better advantage it was giving you.
yeah,
Right?
the thing that
Yeah, that
probably
makes
makes
sense.
you a little bit uncomfortable,
Yeah.
something that I couldn't learn from your resume. So I started, I grew up with Tourette syndrome, had it since about age 8. And so I started
Okay.
writing about, I remember writing my essay about the treatment for it, and,
Yeah.
being at the doctor's office and what that's like, and what it's like to navigate life socially, and how that has set me up to pursue the career, that I want to pursue, and the education I want to pursue. And that worked. And I used that model essentially to get amazing
Help other
scholarships and
people. Right.
fellowships, and in the multiple 6 figures over the years, and help other people. And so yeah, along the way, people have started asking for help. But then when I grew to a certain point, I found myself, and every entrepreneur I think goes through this, I was like saying similar things again and again and again. And I want to send someone a resource. Like I was, I would say, Mitch, like read this online. I found there was nothing really good online.
Right.
There are a bunch of tips, 5 tips to write an essay. You know how those are, 5 tips
Yeah,
to
of
start a
course.
business. It's
They
like,
never really help you. Exactly.
and they don't do anything for you. So I said, you know what? I think I could write something better, something I want my students to have. I put it in, on the internet, on a blog, and I was like, yeah,
Right.
read this. I wrote it, so I don't have to write it again.
Now this was after college. You
Years
graduated.
after years. Yeah.
Oh,
So
years.
this was
Even
going to
after
be,
UCLA?
this was good. Yeah. So, after
Okay.
college, moved back to LA, did my PhD in psychology at UCLA. And so it was during that time I started writing. And then all of a sudden, it was only before it was word of mouth through people who knew me.
Right.
And then I remember the first time.
And was it even a business at that point, or you really were just helping out people that knew you?
Still helping out. And so
Right.
and then, someone random reached out to me. Yeah. I mean, the story of the business is I remember I emailed my parents one night saying, I have a business now. So if
Right.
you know people who want help, let me,
Right.
like, it was
I'm
like,
doing it
it's
officially.
probably like a 4 sentence, like a three
Right.
sentence email. I could probably dig it up somewhere. And so that happened. So that's the start of the business. No, but what really I think changed things for me was when random people I had no connection to reached out and said, hey, can you help with my application? I was like, who are you?
Right.
And
Well,
they're
they read
like,
the blog
oh,
article or something.
yeah, but
Yeah,
except I
that's what
had no
happened.
idea how Google, I'm someone
Yeah, well,
without
in
any
those days though,
formal,
blogging was kind of new, right? There wasn't so much noise, there wasn't so much competition. The
yeah.
algorithms weren't. Yeah, okay.
And even I'm talking even 5 to 7 years, like it's a completely
Still didn't
different
know. Like,
beast.
yeah, it
It's a
changes
different
weekly.
world.
I know it's crazy.
Yeah. And so when that happened, it's like, oh my gosh, okay. And then I eventually so I started writing more. And I remember when my newsletter had like 8 people, I would tell my wife, I need to write this guide. And she's like, why? Why do you need to get it done tonight? I was like, people are waiting for me.
Right.
And then
Eight
I was
people are
like,
waiting for it.
but I had that mentality of like, I felt this
Yeah.
responsibility to these people who are reading this
Right. Well,
newsletter.
it's probably good because there were probably more people out there reading it than you knew of. So,
Yes.
yeah,
And
exactly.
now there's more than 8 people on the newsletter, and a few more eyeballs. But
Right.
so I mean that was the genesis, and then over time, basically got more sophisticated, built systems. I used to do it all myself, and then I remember I was giving a guest lecture at USC.
Hmm.
And then there was a woman in the audience who came up to me after the talk, and the presentation was on psychological assessment. It wasn't even about entrepreneurship. And she said, you know what, like my professor, included your business in your introduction. I kind of do this work too on the side. And so if you have more students than you can handle, like send them to me. I said, no, you should join our
Come
team.
work for you, work with
And,
you.
and,
Yeah.
and then I was like, worried about that because I was like,
Now, what was she saying she did on the side? Like essay writing or the whole
she would assist
process?
people with the admissions process. And so,
Okay.
and then I was really nervous, hiring the first person, because it's like, I know the way I do it and I can always ensure my own quality.
Right.
And then it's like, how is this going to work? And it worked beautifully. This person's a gem. And so,
Well, you think
did
that's
that.
attributable to you and the systems you built, or the fact that she's a bright person
Both.
just kind of fit with a little bit of both? Okay.
Both. Who knows, if my first experience was bad, who knows
Right. You had never gotten another employee. That's
I
what a
would have
lot
been
of us
like, you
shy
can
away
never
from.
trust anyone. No.
Yeah. But
Who
you never
knows?
build a business around that. You
Who
can't.
knows,
You,
right?
you need good people. Right.
Yeah. So I feel very fortunate. I'm certainly not. I never take 100% of credit for anything. I don't even know if I take 50% of credit for it. So I
Yeah.
feel very
I'm much
fortunate
more
to work with.
comfortable with that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel fortunate working with great people, supporting great students and families, and all that kind of stuff. It's a blessing. So I mean, that was the thing. And then one became three, three became more.
Right.
And then we systematize things more and more, produce more and more content, to now where our site gets a lot of reach.
Yeah.
We
I
have
saw
our
your site. You
YouTube
have a pretty
channel,
big
and
team now. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's just it just grew organically. Again, I joke sometimes that I don't talk to any 8-year-olds, and when I ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up, no one says, I want to help people get into college. No one
Right.
and I don't
No one.
anticipate anyone ever will.
Right. No, they
I
won't.
think they'd rather be LeBron James than
Right.
do my job. And so it's not something that I think people just naturally gravitate towards. I think it's one of these things where you demonstrate interest in it, you see that you have strong skill, you're good at it, you assist people, they have tremendous success. And look, if we weren't doing a good job, I would have never done it.
Right.
And
Obviously.
so that's why I kept going, and now I do this full time and really enjoy it. That's the story. That's the long answer.
So now, did you come to, I always ask this question, did you come to a point where you say, okay, I have a business here? Did you sit down and kind of sketch out, write a plan for what you thought it looked
No,
like? You didn't. You didn't
I
say,
still
okay,
don't
this is
have
what
a
I want to.
business plan.
All right, well, that's not good advice for people listening. So they should have a business plan. Maybe Shirag doesn't need one, but that does not mean that people listening
I
shouldn't
don't
have
know.
one. But do you don't think, though, looking back, that there was a point where you sketched out or thought in your mind, like, this is what I see, I would like to know? So you don't have a vision for the company beyond
I
just
wouldn't
helping
say that.
people.
I wouldn't say
Okay.
that. What I'm saying is I do not have a formal written business plan. I never
Right.
had one. Now, along the way, you
Yeah.
put yourself in positions where new opportunities open up to you. And when you have those opportunities, you take them. And as things have developed, I now have an ultra clear vision of what we're doing now and what we're going to do tomorrow.
Right.
But I never had the formal
No,
written
I
down
realize
business
that. And a
plan.
lot
No
of
such
people don't.
document exists.
Right. And a lot of people don't, but you're doing, at least in your mind, like strategic planning as
Of
opportunities
course,
come. Right. Okay. Right.
significantly,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was talking to a friend of mine this morning, Jeff, who was on my podcast, and he's a entrepreneur's coach or whatever. And, a lot of people don't have or take the time to have that vision and say, okay, well, if I want this to be a business, it can't just be me. People think like when it's just them, they have a business. They really don't. They're their own employees. What it
Yeah.
comes down to, you wanted to build a company that provided additional more services and better service, but you wanted the people to have your own vision, right?
Yeah, but but what I'm trying to say here, and I'm going to push back a little bit, is I agree with you that if it's just you're a solo practitioner, it's not a business, right? At the same time, I think that too many so I didn't have the vision at the start. I never did it. I never started helping a single person thinking one day this will become X. Like that
Right.
happened organically because we did good work.
Yeah.
Now that when I saw the opportunity and became a business, now it's a different story. I just want to warn people out there to not try to get everything perfect before they do something. And the
Very good
reason why I want
advice.
to stress the like, I never had a formal business plan. I hear so much about like, ooh, I just need to get my business plan
Yeah. No,
and
that's a
I need
bad.
to get
Right.
my cards and my
Right.
website has to look a certain way before I launch. I'm like, my website at the beginning looks like it was made by a second grader.
Right.
And you know what I mean? So I want to warn people, like if you're like no, I will only, you know, do this when X, Y, and Z
Yeah. They're
happens,
always going to have
or when I
something
have,
that's not done.
and chances are what you start with isn't what it's going to look like
Right. It's an
after. So
evolution.
why are you spending your
Just
time
do it
trying?
and it'll
That's just
develop.
anxiety. It's
Right.
procrastination.
Exactly.
And so that's why I want to, tell people, no, I'm not saying I'm just like a rudderless ship with no vision and,
No,
whatever
right. You're
happens.
definitely not.
I just want
Right.
to, encourage people to
No,
get going and realize that, those pivots are part of the process. That's like, no one gets married thinking they know every single thing that's
not
going to
even
happen in
close.
their
Right.
marriage,
We
not even
just,
close.
right.
And if you
They
think so,
just throw
you're
a question
wrong,
of, yeah, of course. And you know what, Shirag? I think it's really important. And I say this all the time. And I think that's excellent advice. You can't wait till all the lights are green to head towards town. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. You're going to be, this has got to be done. And then something else is going to change. And you'll have another reason that
yep.
you can't do. And people, you're right. Analysis of paralysis and analysis. People just get paralyzed by their own, inability to just move forward. And you're right. It always will change. You always modify your brand. You always change your message.
Sure.
You learn things along the way that you weren't happy with how it worked before, or maybe it did work before. And now people have caught on and it's working different going forward. And I'm sure your business always evolves, just like
Yep.
everyone, the law doesn't stay the same. So I'm sure the college admissions process doesn't stay the same, but excellent, excellent advice.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody gets the impression that you're just winging it and have no plan.
Oh
You're
no,
just developing it as you go.
And look, I don't and when I brought up my response, it was not at all to say, no, I promise
Right.
whatever, like I'm doing my work
Yeah.
and that's going to survive this podcast. But what I'm saying is I want people like to have the right takeaway here about, not to be so obsessed about having this, that. And I love your metaphor about the lights waiting for the lights to all be green. They're not all going to be green.
It's not impossible.
If you
not
think
possible.
they are all green, you're wrong. They're not
Right.
all green. So you just gotta begin somewhere.
Yeah. And I also want to make a comment too. There are people who are solopreneurs, maybe, right? And they don't want to build a company and they want to stay,
Okay.
and that's fine. Yeah, exactly. I'm making the point that they all have to follow your path and then developing into a business. No, not at all. I'm a solopreneur right now. I used to have a bigger law firm. Where I'm going to go from here, frankly, I don't really know, but
we don't know.
I don't want to be practicing when I'm 85 or 90 years old. I have some colleagues who do that and they're a little tough. They have a little tough time with technology, but all right. So let's get back into it. So now your company has, developed where you're really providing service across the board. And it seems that a lot of it is not self-taught. Like self-discovery, right? I mean, you're doing the research, you're discovering like what are people doing to make themselves more interesting, to stand out um, to admissions counselors, right? And
Hmm.
you started originally just with college because you do a lot of graduate school work now, right?
Yeah, I mean, initially, because when I was in college, I was doing it. So I was helping people, in the sphere that I knew. At the same time, I was pre-med all through college. I actually did very well at Cornell and was pre-med the whole even up to the point I graduated. I decided to pivot to psychology afterwards. But so along the way, the admissions nerd in me, I was reading everything about med school admissions and consuming that. And so I actually helped other people get into medical school while I was still in college. And so the interest in medical school was, again, it was personal.
Right.
I wanted to learn it for me and helped other people with it. And so, sometimes people ask about, medical school admissions and they're like, you're a psychologist. I'm like, yeah, but you're not asking me to do surgery. You're asking me to help you get into medical school. It has nothing to do with the practice of medicine. And I happen to be very good at it. Right. So in other words, like, it's about telling your story in a compelling way
Right.
about, things that I couldn't learn from your resume, and also helping people develop the right extracurricular profile, secure the right recommendation letters. We now prep people for the MCAT. And so it's evolved and changed over time because we saw that there was a need to
Prep,
support
you
our
mean like
students
tutor
better.
them for the test?
Hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. And
You expanded into
because,
that?
yeah, and because we found, that a lot of the, courses out there from the big box companies, so to speak,
Right.
they were all
Kaplan
very,
and things like
yeah,
that.
they were all very cookie cutter. You take this course, you do these practice exams,
Princeton review. Yeah, they're all
one
the
size
same.
fits all the
Right.
same. And so we're like, well, this is not good enough. Their diagnostics aren't specific enough. They don't evaluate strategy weaknesses the way that we can. And so I always tell people we do things in a very cumbersome way. In other words, like, developing these resources the right way, doing things truly white glove takes a lot of time,
I'm sure it
because you
does. Yeah.
develop a system and applying it to certain people, and digging into their their question logs and seeing what they did wrong, identifying patterns. These are not easy things. They're very time consuming things to do. But so I always thought, rather than develop the one size fits all, I'd rather get into the trenches with kids and students and help them that way.
So you have a team of people that do tutoring and you have a
Hmm.
team of people that do the admissions process.
Hmm.
It's a different skill, obviously.
Correct. Yeah, they're different. You don't just say, oh, you do this, you could teach a test. No, no, they're
Right.
very different skill sets and backgrounds.
All right. So it seems evident to me that if you're coming in as an undergrad, right, that you want to stand out and seem different. I'm not sure it's evident as to how you do that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, and I've heard this at the graduate school level, especially in medical school, right? You think, well, if you do your prereqs and you do well in biology and chemistry
Hmm.
and organic and all that type of stuff, you apply to medical school to let you in. But I've heard, and you're going to confirm, I'm sure, that they're looking for more well-rounded students. And very often they even want a student that didn't even major in some science. Maybe they're like, my daughter's kind of a journalism, creative writing major, and she's going to do her prereqs for medical school
Yep.
because it seems that the schools, right, they're looking for more diverse. They don't want everybody to be a biology major coming into medical school. Is
Right.
that true?
So there's the question of what they're looking for, but also who comes to the table, and in hindsight, how we interpret that data. Right. So
Okay.
the most popular set of majors for medical school admissions, easily far and away, is the life sciences.
Still,
In other words, people who do biology, molecular biology,
right.
neuroscience, things of this
Chemistry,
nature.
physics, whatever. Right.
Well, those would be physical sciences. Those would be a
Oh,
separate
I see
category.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Got it.
So there's that, and then there's life sciences, there's mathematics, there's social sciences, humanities, and then other stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, there are going to be slight differences in terms of the rates of acceptance for different majors, but it's hard to say whether that's because schools are looking for people in those different majors, or because life sciences are crowded and you have
The
high achievers
availability.
and really
Right.
low achievers, because people in
Right.
life sciences tend to want to go into medicine, all this kind of stuff. But it is true that medical schools do want a diverse student body. And
Yeah.
so part of that diversity comes from people who have pursued different disciplines. Their service experiences and extracurriculars are different. And so sometimes students make the big error of trying to be too well-rounded in and of themselves. In other words, you shouldn't try to be everything to everyone. You should
Right.
try, you have to obviously meet your foundational requirements, but beyond that, I want you to be a specialist. So let's say your daughter is doing her prereq, she's doing great in them. She gets her patient exposure and her research experiences, but then she realizes that what she really loves and what wants her shtick to be is medical journalism. And so maybe
Yeah.
she starts to document, healthcare in different countries, or she takes healthcare findings from the New England Journal of Medicine and publishes them for a lay audience and gets an internship at a place like the New York Times. And all of a sudden she's, translating things for the lay public. And now she's doing a lot of medical dissemination, medical research dissemination, using that for marketing communications, assisting the CDC, like we can go
Right.
all over the place. And so that person, even though their shtick, like I said, or their spike specialty, whatever you want to call it, is related to journalism, it's still a critical part of healthcare.
Healthcare.
How much
Yeah.
have we seen during the pandemic where there is knowledge, but because it's so poorly disseminated,
Yeah.
or the communication is too complex or not right, it just leads people to make poor decisions
Yeah. Well,
one way
that's
or
a huge
another.
problem in healthcare, obviously. Right.
Correct. So you could find the best drug in the world, but if you can't, you know, influence people to take it, your drug
Yeah.
is
Right. If
a
people
pill.
think
It's
that
just a
there's
pill on the counter.
some little secret thing in the thing that goes in your body and they can track you and read your thoughts, yeah, you got a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, so that's the thing, so that's just an example I just thought of off the cuff when you said your
Yeah.
daughter does journalism. So it's
Right.
not the major specifically, it's what someone does through their interests, which obviously tend to be associated with their major.
Well, that makes sense because I do understand that if you're, if you're interested in studying something at school, they're going to look to see if you're just putting that on your application
Yeah,
and you're a member of every club in the high school, which by the way, the schools are not
don't do it.
stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they know you can't go to every meeting. So you obviously just signed up for everything. And to be more of a, a specialist, if you're interested in, my daughter was big in dance and she went to a dance studio. She's dancing 15 hours a week. And, that obviously limited her other extracurricular at
Sure.
school. So the only other thing she did we lose you?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. The only other thing she did was she joined the school. It was either paper or magazine and became one of the editors and wrote for that. And it wasn't healthcare related, but it was writing. So it supported what she was doing. And she didn't sign up for every other, she couldn't do it. She wasn't, available. So, and I think she wrote her essay about dance and she probably will do some tap dancing maybe at school if there's a troupe or something. That's just not her major. It's not going to be her living. But she's always been interested in medicine. She made us one year for Hanukkah buy her Grey's Anatomy. I don't mean like the video series,
The book.
Right, the book. And she had all kinds of tags and marks and dog-eared pages and notes. I mean, all over the thing. And then she made me get her something for the Mac. It was like for her MacBook, it was this program where you could pull up a 3D picture of an organ and open it and label it. And this is years. She was like 11, and she's stuck with it. So we'll see. I told you she just got there yesterday. Today's her first day being a student. Classes don't start till next week. But we'll see what happens. My son was interested in medicine for 2 weeks when he got to school, and now he's a computer science major. So, yeah,
changes mine.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me about are there other things that I should know? I mean, is it really just about differentiating yourself from a essay standpoint and other things, or is there things that people should know, kids, adults, when it comes to the admissions process? Are there tricks, or they're not really tricks?
I often say the admissions process is not complex, it's hard. In other words, let me give you an example, going back to my LeBron James reference from earlier. If you ask me, Dr. Shemmassian, how do you dunk a basketball? Well, the rim is 10 feet above the ground. And,
Right.
How tall are you? Okay. And how much is your wingspan? Okay. Well, you need to be able, and the ball is this high. So based on that, you need to, take a few steps and jump 4 feet off the ground. And then you just dunk it in.
Yeah.
But obviously, the jumping 4 feet
is a lot.
And so it's hard, even though from to explain it, to understand it. It's not complex. And so medical school admissions, college admissions are also that way. And so the way they are is that, you obviously have to get great stats. When I say stats, I mean numbers, GPA, test scores.
Right.
Although in college admissions, we're living during an interesting time when, most schools are gone optional. Some schools have gone test blind, and that's a whole evolving thing. But still, numbers matter. You have to be, at or near the top of your class, do well with your standardized tests, AP exams, IB exams, that sort of thing. But
My
that's
daughter's
just
experience during the pandemic was that if you didn't submit a score and you went optional, they just deferred you till the spring and said, we'll deal with it then. Most of the schools, they didn't
yeah.
even. So if you wanted to get in earlier, didn't help you.
Yeah, they were figuring it out last year. I think this year schools will have a little bit more. I mean, they'll have a lot more experience on how to deal with these things.
Do you
But
think they're going to stick with that? With
schools
some
are
of the
going to stick
schools?
with test optional. I mean, it's not just pandemic related reasons where, you couldn't get a test date and stuff like that.
Right.
The other big issue is the social justice climate we're living in our country.
Yeah,
So
good
what
point.
ended up
Yeah.
happening is, Mitch, every single school basically, who went test optional, and this is certainly true of elite schools, they recruited the most diverse incoming class in their history.
Because people submitted, because people applied when they normally
Complex,
may
complex
not. Right.
question. Because the schools are also existing in the social climate. So they might also say, you know what, we do need to change the way we review students holistically. But also we know in our country that test scores are highly associated with income, and income in our country is highly associated with race. And so when you make tests optional, you're going to get more applications from students from low income and minority backgrounds. And then also, if you're using that less in your assessment, you're going to recruit more. So imagine how popular Princeton would be, Mitch, if they said, we recruited the most diverse class when we went test optional. We are going back to requiring tests. They would be so unpopular if they did that. So I think politically it also wouldn't play well.
That makes sense.
And so I see, people ask me, how do I see it? I don't know if we're going to go back to a world where the SAT or the ACT remain required. I just don't see it. So we're having this conversation at a really interesting time, but still stats are critical. If you don't have them, you're probably not going to be super seriously considered. Now, stats alone do not get you in. I know plenty of people
would get you to the next pile, right?
You got to be considered, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And I have a friend does work for Harvard or something, and she told me that if, at least before the pandemic, let's say, if you didn't have a perfect test score, you got on the discard pile. Like they first start with, okay, if you have a perfect test score, maybe close to a perfect test score, we'll put you in the pile, and then we'll do the next step. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's,
they get so many applications.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
That's the thing. They have to figure out their own filtration systems. But then also, Harvard can fill their incoming class from the rejected pile and have nearly as good of a class. That's how strong their applications are. And so, they're looking for the best of the best. It's a seller's market, right? Like they have all the power in this process.
No question.
They have way more applications than seats. And so they get to call the shots. Now, once you have stats, you get your foot in the door. But what really differentiates you is what you've pursued outside the classroom, as well as the strengths of your essays and your extracurriculars. So the recommendation letters. The extracurriculars are the hardest part for people to figure out, because when it comes to tests, Mitch, study this, get this number, I know where I stand. So people like to, in such an unknown gray process, people love being able to grab onto something. They love being able to say, I have a 1580. That means I'm at this level. Right. Okay, I can breathe. Now, if you give me your resume and I said to you, grade your resume for me, what do you think your resume is out of 100? They'll say, no one has an idea.
Right.
And so that's why people are less confused. So they gravitate toward the thing they know, which is school and tests and numbers. And they completely neglect, oftentimes, or largely neglect, what actually separates them, which is the strength of their extracurricular profile. And the students who become specialists and, you know, have very nerdy, intense pursuits of one or two things,
Right. A
those are the
passion for
students,
something they do.
correct. And
Yeah.
frankly, I would argue it makes them more interesting.
Would agree 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to come to me, you know, if you asked me, hey, what do you do for work? If I said, well, I help people get into medical school. I bake sourdough bread. I make shoes, you know, I
Yeah.
make shoes from scratch, and I arrange flowers.
Yeah. And you're like,
So
who is
yeah,
this guy?
you're gonna be like, who's this rando? Like, I
Right.
want the guy who does this, who lives, eats, and breathes this thing, right? So that's the thing. Where as a college, you know, college hopeful, you have to think about medical school, hopeful, same thing. And one of the rebuttals I often get from parents is like, what are they expecting of our kids? These are
Right.
kids at 14. They just have to know everything. No, that's
Yeah.
not what I'm saying.
That's not
But
the case. Right.
you have to they have to, you know, they have to go for things that they like and do it passionately. And also, going into a top school is a privilege.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not like, I think a lot of people expect that, or think that they deserve a certain school, but no, like a couple thousand people are getting into Harvard every year. It's not like, you know,
Right.
these are very special people. And so if you don't want to pursue things that way, that's okay,
But
but your
isn't the
expectations have to align with that.
right? But isn't the process the same? If I want to go to, and I'm in New Jersey, right? So if I want to go to UCLA or USC, or I'm going to go to North Carolina, or I want to go to one of these state schools where they take a huge number of kids in state and it's very hard to get into, the process is going to be the same, right? I need to stand out to they say, wow, not only is this kid smart and have good grades and everything like that, but he's an interesting person,
Correct.
an interesting student. And interesting doesn't mean you do 14 things and they're all different. I
Yeah.
think parents are very frustrated though with the process, because they go to, and I've been through this is my second kid, right? I go to these meetings with, say, local alumni, or sometimes even on campus, right? And you meet with admissions people and you ask them pointed questions. Like I used to ask the question all the time, would you rather have a student get straight A's in standard courses or get B's in advanced AP honors courses? You know, because they're challenging themselves. Their answer was always, well, we would prefer the student who gets A's in the honors courses. And I would say, that's
And
not
then
the
they laugh.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah, that I
exactly.
ask you. And I think parents are very frustrated because they don't know, because obviously the process is hard, right? Because there's a human component. There's a human being behind the application looking at the profile, and they have biases and they have a system that they need to stop. But it's somewhat subjective, obviously. And you have a child who's on the other side. It's not objective like the scores.
Yep, you're right. And then the answer to that question, I agree with the, you know, the horrible answer of, well, take the hard course and get the A.
Of course, that's
No,
what they want.
But the true, I'll follow up with what I see as the real answers to that question.
Yeah.
Because people ask me this all the time.
The question was obviously, should your child challenge themselves or not? Not what do you want in a student, right?
Yeah, so the B in the AP course is desirable over the A in all the regular classes,
Okay,
from what I have observed. Now the second part to that answer, though, unfortunately, Mitch, is they don't even know what the answer to that question is.
Right, that's why they're answering it that way. Yeah.
Because the context is important, right? Like if someone takes those, you know, B's in ultra challenging courses, the school is crazy tough, but they were also a kid that bused to that school from an hour away because they lived in a certain part of the city, and they're the first kid from their school to even apply to college. You know what I mean? So it just changes. So the reason why they give you a cop-out answer, and we're looking, and why do parents even ask the question? We're searching for certainty.
We're nervous,
during a very uncertain process.
Right.
And so the college admissions professional is taking their scapegoat answer and dodging the question because it's so complicated. But if you're forcing me, you said you got to bet one way or another, I'd say take the B.
Yeah.
Take the
look,
B.
I understand that if your kid takes all honors and AP courses, right, gets all B's, no A's, and there's no other challenging factors, the school might say, well, you know what? He might have trouble here. This might be hard for him to come to
and that would be fair.
Yeah,
that would be fair because these are hard schools. That would be fair for them to say that.
I'll be the first person to tell you, I struggled at Cornell. I
Sure.
got into
It's a
Cornell
hard
because I had a
school.
lot of academics and I had a lot of leadership and stuff through Jewish youth and stuff. And I also found a division of Cornell that had more average scores that more fit my profile. I didn't apply to the main school and I
Sure.
got in. I still have a Cornell degree. But looking back, it was like you took me down an alley, doused me with gasoline, lit me on fire for 4 years. It was more than I'd ever experienced in
It
my
was
high
hard.
school. I came from basically a blue collar town and never had, I think we had 2 AP courses in my whole high school. So I didn't have any of them. I had one honors course and it was very, very, very hard. And I don't know if it served me. I love Cornell, but I don't know if it served me well because I have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
If I went to a large state institution and studied something that I really loved and did better, I don't know. I came out. I'm trying to think. I probably came out with like low B's. I like supported the upper part of the class by but the way they say that. But it was
Sure.
hard. It was very hard. If I knew it was going to be that hard, probably wouldn't have gone to Cornell because I wasn't that kind of student.
Yeah.
So
But there was something about you, right? Because the school and we love to try and distill admissions and even college performance to academics and numbers and stuff like that. There was something about you that made you interesting to the admissions committee at the time. And
yeah,
I'm sure that you have great relationships and people benefited from knowing you and from you being there and stuff like that. So when you think about the entire picture, there are reasons why you ended up the way you are.
well,
And
there's no, and you know what? I'm pretty good when it comes to networking and stuff. I went to the summer program at Cornell. I made contacts there. I found whoever was the best tutor for SATs and was a Cornell alum and on their alumni committee. So I sought her out. She was very busy, but my mom said, my son wants to go to Cornell. She goes, I'll make time for you on Monday afternoon. And she opened up her schedule. So I played the game. I went to every Cornell event and I would meet people. And I wanted to show my interest in the school. Did that help me or not? I have no idea to this day, but I got to believe
probably
it helped
did.
me. Yeah,
Demonstrated
probably
interest
did.
at the time was a bigger deal than it is today. And so, yeah, you did good.
Yeah. So it worked for me. But I do feel now as a parent, the frustration of the enormity of the process, the availability of the ease of application now, right? So the application pool goes up just because you and I didn't have to lay out 17 applications on a dining room table and do all these hand write the essays and
Print
I mean,
them.
we had to put packages together and mail them out. I don't know when you went, but when I
Same.
did,
No,
it
no,
was
same.
the
If
same,
you
right?
wrote
There
it,
was no
if you had a
online.
typo, you change it, you print it again.
Yeah, exactly. There was no what do they call it? The common application, right?
Nope.
There was none of that stuff. And then
I don't remember.
it was
Maybe there
just
was when
nuts.
I don't even remember,
Yeah.
honestly.
So my point is that you really had to want to go to these schools. I think I
Yeah.
applied to 8 or 10. I had a friend applied to 19 schools. I'm like, forget, I would
That's
never have
normal
done that.
now.
Yeah,
That's
because it's a
normal
much
now.
easier,
Yeah.
right? And it's also
it's
much
easier
more
to apply. It's
competitive.
also harder to get it. Yeah,
Are
exactly.
much more, their pools are bigger. So this is a very depressing conversation for most of the parents.
Yeah. Well, happy Friday, Mitch.
Oh boy. But you know what? My son applied to several schools. He got into, and he's very happy at Indiana. My daughter applied to a lot of schools and it was a very tough time. Like you said, I think her ACTs got put off 4 or 5 times. She didn't like her score. Finally, she went test optional. I'm sure it knocked her off for a lot of schools, but she got into Maryland. She's very happy there. And it does work out, but I mean, parents lose sleep, a lot of sleep over this stuff. Yeah. So what do they do with regard to like getting help? They go to your website, read some ebooks, start interacting with your company. Is that where you
essentially, I mean, for folks who,
like
people,
at birth or like when's the best time to start with your company? They don't call you in their 3rd semester of their junior year.
That's right. When your child is born, buy them a onesie of your favorite university and then put their name in our newsletter. No, I'm teasing.
And Instagram, show the school your interest.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I would say that the earliest people will, I mean, there are obviously exceptions. I've had someone reach out to me in 1st grade and stuff, but people, the earliest they'll reach out is around 8th grade, 7th grade. But usually during high school, and obviously people who are applying to medical school anytime from the start of college. And we help people longitudinally. I love helping students for 4 years and developing their profile. Because if someone comes to you senior year, you can only work with what they did. Sometimes they did a good job. Most of the time they didn't. And that's not their fault. They just didn't know. And so, I always tell people it depends, they're like, well, is it too early? I say, how confident do you feel about doing it alone? They're like, not confident. I'm like, well, then we should talk.
Not too early.
But if you feel good about doing it solo, okay, I hope that's true. But yeah, I mean, you can go for that and then get essay help later and all that kind of stuff. But the takeaway is that people can get value at any stage. And Mitch, we were talking about earlier how my parents immigrated to this country with probably literally a few $100s to their name.
Right.
I
Shirt
feel
on their
like everyone
back.
says that, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's my
Literally.
parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I know that I didn't have these resources, nor could my parents afford, this kind of support. So from the beginning, I said, look, I want to put this all out. More people read our stuff far and away than I ever get to interact with.
Of
And
course.
every year people reach out and they say, you've never met me, but all I did was use your resources and I got into Princeton.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And,
Right.
and so, I
And
tell
that's
people,
what
I'm
you
like,
want to hear, right?
and I don't care, if
Yeah.
someone, doesn't interact with me, so long as they get the value, whether it's from one-on-one services, just from our website content, or, signing on our newsletter, it's a treat really to touch people that way.
Okay. So from a business model standpoint, how do you normally work with a student? Is it a package price? Does it depend on what services
Yes.
you're providing?
Yeah. So what happens typically is someone will find our resources either through a referral or internet search. They'll visit our site, have their name in a newsletter and, receive resources. Eventually, when it's their time to apply or when they want services, they'll say, hey, I've been following for a while. I'd love to talk to you. We have a conversation. And yeah, there are certain plans that I created essentially based on what I know students need. Sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I need this. I'm like, you don't know it, but you also need the other thing.
Right.
And so people sign up for a plan, and then that covers everything. So I never thought, sometimes I've seen organizations do this thing where it's like, yeah, we'll help you with this many essays. The word limit is this. We'll do
Yeah.
this many edits. I'm like, no, I don't care. I'd rather charge a bit more, but have it be fully unlimited, because after round two of those edits, your essay might not be done and you
Right.
need more. And
Yeah.
so I'd rather give you the right service rather than lower the
Right.
price to give you
And then you're deciding, should I pay more? Should I get this done? Is
yeah,
it good
what
enough?
should I have
It's a
another
bad
session?
decision
It's
making.
just,
Yeah.
you have to take that, I think it's important for families to just be fully supported rather than try and figure out in a field they don't know.
Yeah.
Like, should I take another pill? I don't know.
Right.
Go to an expert. I
Yeah.
ask them,
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I do appreciate you spending some time with me. We will put links to your website, and I think there's videos on there too, and there's certainly ebooks, right, on the
Yep.
website.
There are some great resources as in the way of, college admissions ebook, med school admissions ebook. I'll also send you some resources. There are a few things we talked about extracurriculars, majors,
Good.
that I
We'll
think
put links to them
I've
in the
written
show
about all
notes. I
this
like
stuff before.
freebies
So
for listeners. It's a good way to start.
it's
All right. So
all
what
free
you
on the
do,
site.
you start helping them, like say at the beginning of high school, going up to college. They usually call me in a panic, realizing their kid's turning 18 just before they're leaving for college, and I have to get them like a living will, HIPAA release, all these forms, because you don't want to discover your kid's in the health center when he's at college and you can't get any information because he's now an adult.
Yep.
So I have an ebook on that too. It's called Parent Survival Guide, sending your kids to college. But mine's at
There
the
you
end.
go.
You can wait till don't wait till 2 weeks before you go, but you can wait till a month or two before you go. So.
That's awesome.
All right, Shirag, I appreciate it. I'm going to go take a nap now, I think. And let's definitely stay in touch. I got a girl who, let's see if she sticks with the medical thing. And if she does,
Happy to help
I'll
her.
definitely put you in touch.
In the meantime, pleasant dreams.
All right. Thanks, Shirag. Have a good weekend.
See you.